Welcome back to our next edition of the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as always by my co-host Ben Anderson. And today we continue the CBB rank countdown that we are doing for each of the 100 days, counting down into the start of the regular season. We're going 100 through 1 on the College Basketball Review site, doing team profiles every day. And today on the CBB Review Studio podcast, we are previewing teams 75 through 71. So let's get it started here with team number 75. Southern Miss Golden Eagles, who out of nowhere went 25-8 last year, 14-4 in their first year in the Sun Belt Conference. Then, of course, they got upset by South Alabama in the conference tournament. Honestly, I think this team absolutely overperformed. They did not lose a lot of games. Obviously, like I said, they only lost 8 games, only 4 in conference play. But when they did, some of them were absolute blowouts. So the season, I'm not saying it's a fluke, but do they deserve to be in this ranking? Ben, what do you think?
I just don't see it with Southern Miss. I think this is really high for a Sun Belt team that we're not even sure is the best in their league. And it's not as if the Sun Belt is this amazing, power conference or even amazing mid-major conference last year. I'm really worried about the front court in this situation, right? They lose Felipe Haas, they lose DeAndre Pinckney, right? Those were arguably two of the 3 best players on the entire team last year. How do you replace that? You have Austin Crowley, who's a fantastic player, and you have Andre Curbelo, which I'm sure everyone has an opinion on, yeah. Right? But when you're competing in the front court, right, that's just as important. Are we going to see a guard-oriented team that's only guards, or are we going to see a guard-oriented team that also has the ability to hold up in the post?
Yeah, and furthermore, their three-point percentage last year was very poor. They only shot 32.4%. Now, I did further research on this and realized that the Sun Belt is a league where they really don't shoot the ball well in general. So they're in good company shooting that low, but Curbelo definitely does not help in that regard. But hey, we've said a lot of negative things about Southern Miss. There are definitely redeeming qualities. It's not like this 75th ranking came out of nowhere. Some of our peers on the site had their reasons, and I think a lot of it is that combo guard that really emerged last year in Austin Crowley, who transferred down from Mississippi State the year before and then became Southern Miss's leading scorer last season. He returns. I think he'll be a huge part of what Southern Miss wants to do on both sides of the court. Very good on both ends, on-ball defense and scoring the ball. And then we got to talk about the storyline, which you mentioned and I mentioned too. Curbelo coming in from First Illinois, then St. John's, now at Southern Miss. Now, we don't know whether or not he will get his waiver approved, so that could really affect the ranking that we have of Southern Miss. If he's not playing, I think they have no business being in our top 75. But we saw him flash his potential as an offensive playmaker. And if he's good to go, even though the front court has a lot of question marks, that's a really solid backcourt right there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one player I do want to note that I could see making a leap is Donovan Ivory. He was a 6'8" wing last year who was serviceable, right? Averaged just over 5 points, a couple of rebounds. But if you're looking for a connector piece, I think he can do good damage in the wing position here for Southern Miss.
Okay, so putting it all together, we talked about the Sun Belt. Not a great league, but they are our number 1 in the Sun Belt, Southern Miss, that is. We also had in our top 100 as a site, we had James Madison. They were our number 2, 95th overall. I think that's pretty much the consensus top 2 in the conference. You could throw Appalachian State in there if you want as well, but I think that's your top 2, top 3. Do you have a strong opinion on who should be number 1 in this conference?
I think that I would actually lean Appalachian State to be number 1 in the Sun Belt. I like what they return. I think they have a really solid core, whereas Southern Miss and James Madison are losing a fair amount of pieces, right, year over year. And just Appalachian State, they've been building. I like their size up front as well. While James Madison has some of that, I think James Madison has the highest ceiling out of these 3. I just think Appalachian State will be able to perform the best in the Sun Belt just considering
So,
this play.
so a little bit of disagreement among our site's contributors, but that's what makes it fun around here.
Yeah.
Let's move on to number 74. And this is a team I'm a lot more high on. College of Charleston, the Cougars, who had a breakout year in season 2 for Pat Kelsey. They went 31-4. They won the CAA. They earned a 12 seed. They did lose to San Diego State, but that was a competitive game, and albeit San Diego State was the national runners-up, so not too bad there. They had 5 double-digit scorers. The big storyline surrounding College of Charleston was how well-rounded, how well-balanced their scoring was last year. And they returned 2 of them, 2 of those 5. Their shooting guard, Rain Smith, and their center, and Ante Brzovic. And, the interesting thing about this team, I think, is that they could totally replicate this. They have a lot of guys transferring in, but they are from mid-major conferences or worse. That's the interesting thing. They're not necessarily higher major guys moving down. It's guys at even level playing fields moving to Charleston, or guys at lower level conferences, even divisions, moving up.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up about replication for this year's Charleston team, because that's what stuck out to me with the types of transfers they landed. They didn't land necessarily a number 1 option, or at least they weren't a number 1 option at last year's school. But if you wanted to have 5 double-digit scores, I think that's very feasible, especially in the Coastal Athletic Conference, where it's not, the top of the mid-major ranks here, right? In terms of strength, I do like Brzovic. This is going to be a huge team. I do want to mention that, especially for this lower level, right? If we're looking at Policelli and Brzovic and even Ben Burnham, right? There's a lot of size up front, and I think that's something that's going to be really the strength of this College of Charleston team. But if you're looking at the front court, I really want to see CJ Fulton, perform, right? I transfer from Lafayette. It's really important to have a solid point guard running your offense, and I think they found one in Fulton. But I do think he's sort of the X factor in how the Cougars perform.
Yeah, I really like Policelli, a double-double machine at Stony Brook. Stony Brook was one of the bottom dogs of that conference, now moving up to the top dog. So we'll see if that replicates, but I totally think it can, depending on what his role is at Charleston. There's also a few interesting ones. There's another Nova Southeastern guy moving up. I feel like we've said that a lot on these episodes, but Kobe Rogers comes up from Division II powerhouse to Charleston. And then this is the one I think is the most interesting, is Bryce Butler from West Liberty. West Liberty is the team that Nova Southeastern beat in the Division II championship, but Butler just put up video game numbers there. So we'll see how that goes at Charleston. A lot of interesting pieces. This is a revamped roster. Pat Kelsey's a very well-established coach at this level, one of the best at the mid-major level. There's no reason to believe they won't run it back, and they could perhaps improve. And Charleston, they're a fun team. They shoot a lot of threes. They're up-tempo. They score a lot. I'm excited for
yeah, absolutely. I was a little bit skeptical given how much they lost that we ranked them this high, but the more I dug into the roster, the more I looked at the pieces they've produced in the transfer portal. I really do like this College of Charleston team to make it back to the tournament.
All right, number 73. We have a team that's definitely in a prove-it year for their head coach, Mike Hopkins. That is the Washington Huskies. They've had a pretty rough stretch. They did go 16-16, 8-12 in Pac-12 play last year, but the Pac-12, for their few good teams they had last year, they were not very deep at all. So going 8-12 in conference is unideal. This is a team I think underperformed their true talent last year, and I think they actually do have a significant more amount of talent coming in this year. The question is, can Hopkins maximize this talent? And that's why I think it's a prove-it year.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that stuck out to me about the Huskies is their depth. I mean, if you look at what they have, arguably 9 interchangeable guys that could start here. Even if we're not talking about players like Mulcahy or Brooks or Wheeler, if you look down, like Moses Wood transferring in from Portland, right? He's going to average 15. He could come off the bench. Or Frank Kepnang, right? He played well in the limited amount of games that he played, only 8 last year before he ended it with an injury. He could start reasonably at a Pac-12 level program. So I just think that having that type of depth, having that type of rotation is going to be really powerful for Hopkins. And as long as he is able to find the right five at the end of the game, I think he's going to be able to improve in 2023.
Yeah, another thing that stuck out to me, the 3-point shooting, because last year it was pretty awful. They were I think they were last. No, I take that back. They were not last in the Pac-12. They were better than only Cal in the Pac-12. So might as well be last. But they brought in a lot of guys with high percentage 3-point marks, including Nate Colmeese from Lamar shooting 36.7%, Mulcahy from Rutgers 37%, Moses Wood from Portland 40.3%, Wheeler from Kentucky 36.6%. And yeah, their front court, at least the starters, and you talked about the bench a little bit, looking really good. Braxton Mia comes back, and most importantly, Keon Brooks. This is going to be a good team on paper. But again, we have not seen it yet with Hopkins, or really recently at all with Washington. And we project them 8th in the Pac-12. Maybe there's one or two teams I would bump them ahead of. I'm not going to mention names because that would spoil some of the future rankings that we're going to do on this site. But I think where we have them is relatively fair. It is still prove it, like I keep saying.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about Washington is I do think they have a high ceiling, right? That's what I see when I see this team. We talked about Utah the last episode. While I think they're going to have a higher floor than Washington, I just don't think they can reach the top 5 of the Pac-12. I do think if everything falls right for Washington, they can get in that top 5 range, look for a bid, and be successful in Mike Hopkins' prove it year.
All right. Well, let's move on to number 72, and we go to the ACC with this one. We have the North Carolina State Wolfpack, who this 72 ranking might appear to be a little low for Wolfpack faithful, for ACC fans, because last year Kevin Keatts made it to the tournament. This was the first year that he made it to the tournament since year 1 of his tenure, but he earned an 11 seed and lost to a good Creighton team in the first round. This NC State team was fun. They were a high-scoring offense. They did lose their leading scorer, Terquavion Smith. They did lose Jarkel Joyner. They also lost some bench pieces. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I'll let you go first, analyzing these Wolfpack.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to tell because Casey Morsell and DJ Burns do return, but can they be the number 1 and number 2 options? That's what I'm concerned about when we're talking about NC State, because I don't think it's going to be Cam Woods. He did average 17 points per game at NC A&T, North Carolina A&T, but it was not on the best efficiency, right? And you never know how that's going to translate up to a high major level. And then you're looking at like DJ Horn. Is he a number 1 option? Is Muhammad Diarra a number 1 option? Is Michael O'Connell or Jaden Taylor a number 1 option? I'm just not sure. I think they are full of role players and they will be very solid, but do they have that number 1? Do they have that go-to guy in the final 5 minutes of a game in an ACC contest?
Yeah, I think that's why the dynamic of the team will change so much. We're used to Terquavion Smith and this NC State team having this high ceiling, being able to compete with the big dogs and then potentially dropping some games multiple at a time that you wouldn't want them to. I think the dynamic completely changes because, yeah, you have Burns. He's your offensive staple, probably going to get you your 14-6 a night, but he's also a defensive liability. And then Casey Morsell, well, he's good on defense, and he could shoot the 3 ball pretty well. He's a good catch and shooter, but he needs somebody that could allow him to play the role that he wants to. I think those are secondary scorers, like you said. And of the guys that you mentioned, will they be the number 1 option? I'm going to say DJ Horn is probably the best candidate outside of Morsell and Burns to allow Morsell and Burns to thrive at their highest. He is an Arizona State transfer. He scored in high volume, but not the highest efficiency. But then again, neither did Terquavion Smith. So they're used to that. I think the positives on this team still make them higher than we have them 72nd as a site in the preseason. But I can't see them threatening the top of the ACC here.
No, I think I agree. Obviously, we'll talk more as we get closer to the season starting about who those top tier ACC teams are. NC State, I do think their ceiling is like the second tier, maybe like 6, 7 seed. I can't see it higher than that at this point. Now, obviously, this is preseason; it can change, but that's where I'm at with this team right now.
And then at that point, it just depends on how good is the ACC, how deep is it? Because
absolutely,
yeah, that's definitely a question mark as well. Our final team of the day, we're going to talk about Nebraska. They are on a tournament drought since 2013 to 2014. That was the last time they made it. But they did take a stride forward last year. They got to 500, and I think they could take another step forward this year and potentially be on that bubble. There are 2 transfers that I really like. The first one being Jaron Coleman from Ball State. He's just your do-it-all 6'5" point guard. And then Bryce Williams coming in from Charlotte, who's another versatile guy, a 6'7" wing. I think this team gives you more than any Nebraska team in terms of well-roundedness that we've seen in recent history.
No, I agree. I'm glad you made that point. They're really well built. They have players at every position, and I don't know if you could ever say that for Nebraska in the previous years. Can you believe it's already year 5 for Fred Hoiberg? It feels like he just got there like 2 years ago, but no, year 5. I do think this is the team to make the tournament for the Huskers, or at least the best chance to have made the tournament under Fred Hoiberg in his tenure there. I really like Casey Tominaga, who's coming back. He's one of the most fun players to watch in all of college basketball. So if you want to turn on the Huskers, make sure to catch him on the wing, just shooting just random 30-foot threes, because that's what he does. It's a fun watch for sure. Bryce Williams is a great point. Rink Mast will be reliable above all else. He's sort of replacing Derek Walker in my mind as that post player. And then even on the bench, you have players like CJ Wilcher, a standard within the Nebraska program for a couple of years now. Josiah Alec, who's coming over from New Mexico, will provide solid front court depth. I mean, there's a lot to like about this Nebraska team, I think. And the more I do research into them, the more I like what the Cornhuskers have to offer. And, it is going to be a tough Big Ten, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I really like Tominaga. I mean, he has range, but he also has efficiency. He could really be in for like second team all Big Ten, if not higher year. Am I going too far with that? Maybe, but no, I think he's a great player. And yeah, well-roundedness is the name of the game of this Nebraska team. It's a similar storyline to Washington. Like, they haven't done it in a while, so they're set up well on paper. Can they prove it to me? Well, that's why they're 71 and not like 20 spots higher. Maybe based on roster talent they are, but this will be an interesting year with Nebraska in the Big Ten. We'll see. Like I said, with the ACC, how many bids can this league get, and where do they place among the pack?
Absolutely. Okay, question for you.
Yeah.
Right now, does Nebraska make the tournament? Yes or no?
No.
I think I agree with you. After all the good things we said about it, I can't. It's hard to picture it right now, but I hope I'm wrong. Because I really like Hoiberg. I really like the program.
Yeah. I mean, I just said how much I pretty much agree with the 71st ranking, and 71 is not in position in a power conference to make the tournament. So
yeah, unfortunate, but that's how it goes sometimes. I'd love to be wrong with all of these teams, really, Washington and Nebraska. But we'll have to see how the season plays out.
All right, and we will continue with 70 through 66 next episode in 5 days. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the CBB Review Studio podcast. Be sure to subscribe if you have found us on YouTube, if you have found us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review if you have found us there as well. But thank you so much once again for watching and for listening, and take care.